They waited inside the dome watching the sky burn from a distance. City 9, once the jewel of the eastern sector, now sank beneath the weight of silence. The shield still shimmered above, a dome of pale blue energy stretched thin against the void. It trembled every few hours. Small distortions rippled across its surface like stress fractures in old glass. Power failed in intervals. Lights dimmed and surged. The municipal grid could no longer maintain rhythm. Emergency systems cycled to conserve charge. In the upper districts, food was hoarded in concrete vaults. In the lower levels, silence had settled in, a silence that suggested the dead far outnumbered the living. No one trusted the news feeds. No one believed the emergency bulletins. It had been 9 weeks since the last confirmed supply drop. 5 since the water rationing began. 4 since the food printers failed. And 2 since the dome's inner climate system defaulted, casting half the sectors into freezing darkness. They had begun eating things not meant to be eaten, protein extracted from waste systems, mushrooms grown in isolation tanks. The rumors came next. Black market limb sales, cannibal groups operating just outside the drone patrol zones. No one said the words out loud. No one had to. Outside the dome, the enemy waited. No one had ever seen their true form, only their mechs. Towering black machines positioned in a wide ring around the city's edge. They never advanced. Never fired. They simply stood watching and waiting. Their patience was worse than any bombardment. The people of City 9 had watched other strongholds fall. City 3 was the worst. A fleet of aerial drones had captured the collapse in fragments before the signal went dark. The shield over City 3 had failed in the early morning. For 13 minutes, the people inside tried to flee. Mechs descended in coordinated strikes. No warnings, no demands. In one clip, a defense tower discharged a final burst. The blast didn't even register against the mech surface. Seconds later, it was gone. One of the sanitation workers had been there. He had survived by accident. Trapped in an underground facility during a shipment run. When he emerged, the streets were empty. No fire and no bodies. Just the sound of wind moving through hollow buildings. City 5 tried to negotiate. City 5 had sent a delegation with beacons and white signal cloths. The last image showed a mech walking through the remains of that group, dragging something fused into his chassis. The transmission cut off there. Inside City 9, no plans were made, no rescue expected. They lived now in the long countdown between pulses of the failing dome. Beneath a defunct service bridge in the sanitation district, 4 figures huddled against a thermal pipe that no longer warmed. They were orphan laborers, garbage crews with no implants, no records, no family, left off the census, unseen, forgotten. They wore patchwork gear stripped from waste bins and old uniforms. Their hands were raw from tearing recyclables without gloves. Their faces carried the dry, blistered imprint of chemical exposure and sleep deprivation. They had stopped speaking days ago. There was nothing left to say. One of them had started counting the shield pulses. Every 36 minutes, the field flickered, a faint stutter of blue across its arc. He had scratched each interval into the side of the pillar beside them. The marks now curled halfway around the base. Sometimes the others watched him scratch without comment. Other times they turned away. It was a ritual of the doomed. The prophet's message returned. The broken terminal embedded in the bulkhead above them flashed blue and spoke in a voice grainy and damaged. By this time tomorrow, the gate will overflow. The hunger will lift. They'd heard it before. The voice repeated, then cut to static. The message was old now, maybe pre-recorded. The man who spoke it had been taken by reclamation units days ago. No one had seen him since. Once, others had gathered to listen. Now the tunnel stayed empty. No one believed in promises. When the next pulse came, the 4 stood without discussion. They moved with slow certainty. Past the bins, past the sensor blind spots. Toward the edge where the dome brushed the ground. The maintenance gap was real. An irregularity in the power cycle. They had watched it for days. The field blinked once, briefly, like a tired eye. During that moment, there was space to slip through. They waited, then stepped forward. No alarms triggered. No drones descended. No surge of electric force. One after another, they crossed into open night. The air outside was different. The landscape was black stone and quiet sand. Nothing moved. Not even the wind. The mechs stood in the distance. Motionless giants. Their limbs were still. Their lights dimmed. They cast long shadows that did not shift. They approached the perimeter. The line of mechs was visible now, towering figures silhouetted against the dim sky. Their posture had not changed. Their limbs hung still. The four stopped just short of the nearest one. Its weapons remained powered down. Faint lights pulsed slowly across its frame. One reached out and tapped the lower leg, but it gave no reaction. Another circled to the rear and knocked twice against its base. No movement. They waited. Minutes passed and nothing changed. Cautiously, they stepped forward, past the first mech and then the second, and a dozen more. Each one loomed above like a monument. Only when they had cleared the ring did they begin to breathe again. They walked slowly toward the interior zone beyond the perimeter. They stopped at the ridge. Below them stretched a field encampment. Rigid structures stood hollow. Prefabricated shelters and armored pods, their doors left open. Fuel drums lay on their sides. Crates of rations spilled across the gravel. Equipment lay discarded. Power cables still vibrated faintly with residual charge. And dozens of mechs stood dark and unmoving. One stood with its hatch open, its cockpit exposed. One of the four climbed inside. Panels still glowed. The HUD displayed its final log. Hostile force approaching, unidentified, immense. Recommend total retreat. It hit them in an instant. There was no one left. The enemy was gone.